Welcome to Beauty as a Birthright, a podcast that explores awakening our six senses: touch, smell, sight, hearing, taste, and intuition through embodied Daoist practices. I'm Dr. Tamsin Lee, a Daoist metaphysical expert and founder of Elemental Archetypes, sharing face reading, Batsa astrology, and seasonal living.
And I'm Dr. Paige Yang, owner of an integrative health clinic in Honolulu and founder of Yang Face, a culturally appreciative Chinese facial tool brand. Join us on our personal journeys as we navigate the complexity of inner, outer, and relational beauty. We'll chat about how awakening our beauty through the six senses impacts our relationship to aging, childhood trauma, romantic relationships, motherhood, dating, careers, and so much more.
Let's awaken our senses and explore beauty as a birthright.
Hello, hello. Hi, Tamsin.
Hi. We are still in the month of September, but Virgo season is no more.
I know.
But I thought it'd be interesting to talk about birthdays and solar returns, born days, however you want to call it, and maybe talk about it in terms more of Chinese medicine, because both of our birthdays were in the month of September, right?
Yes, and 3 days apart.
Yeah, I always forget that. We're September Virgos.
The superior. No, I'm joking. Not really, though.
So I'm curious to know, how do you feel about birthdays? Because I was thinking about it, like so many people have different feelings about birthdays. I was thinking about a couple of my friends that I grew up with. They would have like a 1 month long celebration, like every weekend, full on. We go out, we're going to the beach, we're doing brunch, we're doing like dinners, rooftops. Like by the third week, I'm like, I'm so tired. So how do you feel about birthdays?
First, I'll say that I love the people that celebrate like that. I just love it because I have some close friends from France and they do half birthdays too. That's a big deal.
What's that?
And like when it's like 6 months out, half
Is this
birthday.
a French thing?
It might be other countries in Europe that do it too, but definitely a French thing. Whoa. And my good friend Anais, who I went to medical school with, when it was her half birthday, she was like talking to me about it. She's like, "Oh, my family forgot my half birthday." And I was like, this is so interesting because it is not a thing in the US.
Yeah, I've never heard of it.
And it's like really important and significant. And anyway, I love it when people like to celebrate their birthdays because I love to be a part of the celebrating.
Oh, really? Okay. And then what about you?
It's so fun.
Do you like to celebrate your own birthday?
I used to be really shy about my birthday because it's September 3rd, which it always falls around Labor Day.
Yeah.
And so either because before school started later when I was going to school, now it starts in August, or I don't know if it starts even earlier in some states, but my birthday would always start, the school would always start after Labor Day. So most years it was like school had just started. And so people didn't really remember it was my birthday because the start of school is such a huge deal for everyone. And I couldn't expect people to remember my birthday as a huge deal too. So I used to be shy about it because I felt like I had my birthday silently a lot of the time when I was growing up. So I was kind of like, it's the first day of school. Oh, it's my birthday. Or like, it's my birthday yesterday. So I used to be shy about it before. But now that it's Noah and I's birthdays, my son and I's birthdays, it's definitely a bigger celebration. And I'm kind of learning from him to enjoy it more, celebrate more, have more fun around it, plan more around it. So yeah, it's changed.
I know. But our birthdays are like near the first day of school. That's
I know. What was it like for you? And then what is it like now?
My parents threw really great birthday parties for me as a kid when we were living in New York. So I remember having like lots of great memories of just like kids in the neighborhood, kids in my building. But then when we moved, my parents were working more, and so it was just a different culture. And so I think that's when my when I started to not like my birthdays. Like I didn't have a lot of friends. And so it's been my birthday journey has been like really interesting. Like there have been years as an adult where like I forced having a party and forced having fun and like forced celebrating. Um and I think part of that comes from my Leo side. Like I need to like be the life of the party, but I never felt like it just, I don't know. It always made me feel uncomfortable. I always have this like big fear that I'm going to have a party and nobody shows up. I'm sure that's
Mhm.
happened in my childhood. And that's a real fear that's actually manifested. um, there have been birthdays where I got so drunk that like I don't even remember being at my party. um, and then the last few years, I've been celebrating alone. The one thing
Mhm.
my parents do is that they call me at the exact time that I was born. They
Oh
always do
my
that. My
gosh, what
mom does
time is
that.
that?
1:43 a.m. So I always get a call
Oh,
and they
that's
always
like
saying
I
happy
love
birthday.
you. 143.
What does that mean? I what?
It means I love you.
143?
Yeah, because one is I, love has 4 letters, and you has 3 letters. So,
In what
like,
in what culture? Like what are you talking about?
in middle school, we would always put like 143 instead of I love you. Like when we'd sign yearbooks or sign like the back of our photos.
Oh, we never did that. Oh, wow. I like that.
Yeah. So you're born on like an I love you code.
Oh my God. You know, so half my family is deaf or hard of hearing. And so
Mhm.
if you are given a sign language name. And it's usually by somebody who is, who's deaf, right? They give you a certain name. And my name is this, which is I love you.
See, Tamsin? There's
It's
no
like a
such
version
thing
of
as
I love you.
coincidence.
Yeah.
So
Ooh.
143 New York time? East Coast
No,
time?
I was born in Kansas. So
Okay.
Heartland time, Central time.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. My dad was in the army, so I was born on army base. I was supposed to be born in Germany. How weird would that been?
Wow. Yeah.
Right? Well, this is a good segue to like talking about like Chinese metaphysics and medicine and like
Mm-hmm.
the theory and stuff like that about how we're born, right?
Yes.
Do you want to kick it off? I just love like how Chinese medicine views like birth and born.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah. So I would, what's cool too is I was trying to bridge parallels between what's said in the West and then, Chinese medicine and Taoist philosophy. And of course, like everyone will talk about how when you're in utero, you and your mother are one. And they say, like, oh, the mother and the baby, they don't have separation. The baby's consciousness believes that they're one with the mother. And it takes a while, it's believed. Maybe there's been studies already to prove it, but for the baby to realize that they're separate. And I was thinking how in Taoism, it's like, and in Chinese culture, there's this delay of naming the child because with the delay of naming, you're delaying the separation from the Tao. Because as soon as you put a name to something, they're separate from the Tao, right? Because they're defined. And so I don't know traditionally how, if there was an exact amount of days that people would wait before they would name a baby. But it was intentional because the longer you kept them one with the Tao, the more like wisdom or knowledge they could download because they were not separate anymore. And then that separation, as we understand it in many cultures, is like the cause of suffering. But the interesting thing is like when you're one with the Tao, you know yourself more than anything else because you realize that you're not separate. But it takes a separation and a name and a Tao and a destiny to like really learn that and come back to the Tao.
Whoa.
Like it's just so interesting this like this cycle. So I mean there's so much to be said. That's just one level of it, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. But
I
tell me
love
more.
that.
Yeah.
I think Korean culture has something similar like that in waiting to name.
Mhm.
I think it also taught, it's maybe other cultures have that. Also, because like you don't even know that baby back in the day if that baby is going to stay alive, and I think
Mhm.
that's the other reason. Um, I forgot about that. It's so beautiful. The So I always think like when I work with clients, I always tell them that like your natal chart is, I truly believe that you chose this like the moment
Mhm.
before you were born. So at that, and I always tell them like you were much wiser then. Who knows why we chose this chart for whatever reason, but that's
Yeah.
what we chose. And I remind them like we literally come from the stars. That's how Taoists believe that the Shen from the universe, from the stars, which is our highest consciousness, meets with the Hun, which is the wood element spirit, which is all about visions and dreams and this ability to roam and go into different realms. Simultaneously, the Zhur of the water element comes from the unconsciousness, from the collective unconsciousness. And then the Po and Yi come like a little bit later, right?
Mhm.
Um, and so I'm getting ready to do a workshop in October called the Hungry Ghosts Workshop. And it's a lot about, letting go. And we're going to really descend to the underworld and really focus on the Po and the different Po spirits. Um, and the idea that I was always taught is that suffering really begins at that first breath when the
Yes.
Po is awakened. And Po spirit, we don't really talk about it in acupuncture school. At least mine didn't. Like we really glanced over it. But it's the only. It's considered a spirit, but it's actually called the corporeal soul, right? And so it's
Mhm.
like when the babies start to animate their body and their eyes, it's like that's when you can actually see the Po spirit. You can't see other spirits or the manifestation of
Right.
that spirit. And the Po is uniquely ours in this moment. When we die, that Po spirit descends. It doesn't come back. Our Shen will come back. Our Hun will come back. The Zhur is always
Mhm.
coming. But the Po is like, this is it. This is the lifetime. And that first breath, I love I had a teacher who said, your breath is the bookends of life. Life begins with your first breath and life ends with your last breath. And so we were talking about, breathing practices, why it's so impactful to practice
Mhm.
breathing because it is literally the bookends of life.
Right. Yeah. And then I think of how that relates directly to chi, right? So we know that there's like pre-heaven or prenatal chi, post-heaven, postnatal chi, and then where you get those two things from. And that first breath is really, like you're saying, the bookends of your life and how you're separate and you're foraging alone in a way. Like, some people will say, oh, you're born alone, you die alone. And that can be confusing because people will be like, what do you mean? People are next to me, people are with me. But it's that spiritual journey, right? That you are walking on your own in this path. But then the influence that she plays in this and the choices you make. And I think that is where, because several times in this podcast, we talk about destiny and free will
Mm-hmm.
and how to balance those two things. And the chi aspect, to really simplify it, that's the free will aspect. So it's what the choices you're making, whether it's as simple as like, the food you eat, the water you drink, the air you breathe, but also the people you surround yourself with, the relationships you get into, all the choices you make on a daily basis that that give that information, that chi into your body. And yeah, and just I could go on, I'm like, which path do I go
Yeah,
down with this
exactly.
theory? um but the point is then that you can explain everything with Chinese medicine and Chinese medicine theory
Yeah.
because you can always relate everything back to one of its concepts.
Yeah. And in talking about suffering, it's like this Buddhist concept, right? That we're all born into suffering. And so you kind of mentioned that disconnection from the mother and the baby, right? And then you can think
Mm-hmm.
of it in terms of that first breath, because before, your mother was the one feeding you. You're in the womb. She's protecting you, covering you. Her breath is your breath. But that moment that baby takes that first breath is the moment that baby enters suffering. And
Mm-hmm.
for me, when I was learning about Buddhism, when I learned that we're all born into suffering, like, it wasn't, I was like, oh, that's great. Like, in a good way. I was like, I felt so relieved, because it was like, it's not just me. Like, that is the purpose of life. Like, we are born into
Right.
this suffering. And so, and then it clicked in my head that I'm like, okay, so for the rest of my life is to find a way to live with this suffering, find ease, co-create with it, make sense of it. I mean, that's the whole purpose of life. So for me, when I learned that, it was like it was really empowering in a weird way. I can see how for some people it could feel like such a downer, like we're born into
Mm-hmm.
suffering. But to me, I was like, great, we're all on the same, like, this is the same playing field for us, right? That's the whole purpose for all of us.
Right. But the messaging is really profound in this, because it's essentially saying the separation from mother is the start of suffering. And then when you extrapolate that on a macro scale, it's like, well, what's the mother? The mother is the ultimate creator, Mother Nature. And so when you think about healing the suffering, it's often returning to that source energy. So being out in nature, healing mother wounds, or connecting back with divine feminine. And then I also noticed that practices that people engage in to heal are practices that resemble being back in the womb. It's like, go jump in the water, go in a deprivation float tank,
Mm.
do this, like, practice in asana, and be silent, be still, be out
And
in nature.
touch practices.
Yes,
I'm
but it's
obsessed
like,
with touch practices now.
oh, ooh, okay. And
Yeah.
that's awesome, because it's going into the senses. But
Yeah.
what I was just saying is, like, that's the return to what we were doing in the womb. That's what heals us. And so it's just a fascinating, like, this pattern. But no, so tell me more
Yeah.
about the touch senses.
Well, I want to go back to this, like, mother thing real quick, because
Hmm.
because I don't want to keep plugging my workshop, but in the workshop we are going to meet. I've been also obsessed. So I did my clinical externship in Taiwan. And so I
Hmm.
visited a lot of temples, and there were two goddesses that I was obsessed with. And one of them was Shangmu. I don't know if I'm pronouncing her name correctly, but she is the Great Mother. That's one of the names, the divine yin, the yin chaos. Her archetype shows up in so many different other cultures, like in Greek mythology, Roman mythology, Hinduism. But she is the mother of the metal spirit, the mother of Po. And so she helps you connect with your hungry ghosts and your Po spirits. And that is like to me, when I learned about her, because we always talk about Kuan Yin in
Yeah.
school, and for some reason I could never connect with her. I just like I see great the statue, it's a powerful pose. I just like could never connect. But when I learned about Shangmu, it's like I was like, oh my god, this makes sense. Like, all of her makes sense. It's so powerful. I mean, she's even protected by all the mythical creatures, like the dragon, the tortoise, the moon hare, the rabbit in the moon. She's like the queen of the peach blossom. Like, it just goes on and on and on. And basically the story is that she is the Tao, like,
Hmm.
chaos of yin. I don't know where I'm going with that, but touch, Po. And so I think I owe you, like, a thanks to you to, like, plant this seed in my head of, like, you need to focus on touch, because I think, a few months ago, I had experienced something traumatic. I remember telling you about this, and you shared an institution work by Peter Levine, Dr. Peter Levine. And I was familiar with his work because I came to his work like almost 20 years ago. And he basically teaches somatic embodiment practices, right?
Yeah.
And you kind of like put that seed in my head. And then you also put this other seed of IFS, internal family system, right?
Mhm.
And I was like, okay, cool. Like, this is Paige, intellectual. This is really out of my thing. But it kept appearing and appearing and appearing in my life. And it got to a point where I ended up training, doing my training. And I'm now starting to do 2 more trainings, a different type of certification training. But they're all about somatic embodiment. A lot of the therapists, these courses are primarily for therapists, but a lot of them come from IFS, come from
Mhm.
attachment theory. And so it's overload. And to me, I've just been obsessed with touch practices, and I'm learning different types of practices. And I think that I'm at a place right now where I'm really, I'm in the metal age, which is the 40s. And it's like all these, of course, then you would have to work with the Po, which is all about
Right.
touch.
Mhm. Yeah, that's so interesting. And then we were entering the metal season
Yeah, we're in
too.
full on. October is like when the veils are thin,
Mhm.
spooky
Yep.
time.
Yeah. I was thinking,
Yeah,
oh no, I was just thinking about, gosh, I hope I don't lose listeners with all of this, or we don't with all this theory, but it's just like, it's incredible. So this, when you talked about Shangmu
yeah,
and her representation of the Tao, or is that how you worded it? Or she
yeah.
is,
I've heard multiple
so
stories like she is the Tao, or she represents the Tao. Like,
yes. Okay, so the story that I heard that says the same thing, it's just a cooler, it's another way to say it, is that it was the Tao's consciousness of self that created a vibration, and that vibration created Shangmu.
oh my god, I just got chill.
So it was the Tao seeing the Tao. Like it was like, in it's like the story of Shiva and Shakti, right? Where it's like when
Yeah,
Shiva realized that they were Shiva, that realization of consciousness, like Shakti was born. And so it's the same story with the Tao and Shangmu. And I think now like a lot of these goddesses, they're just like different facets of light consciousness of this oneness of the Tao that then vibrated out and created whatever you want to call it, the avatar, the like solid form of that vibration. And then like I don't know, it's just like so interesting. And then how it's related to the Po, and I feel like you could look at all of these different goddesses and give it a different spirit, and then see how that explains a different part of this multifaceted consciousness. And so your attraction to that part tells me, and you've already said it, but it, like that your attraction to this part of consciousness is so much in touch right now.
totally.
Yeah.
I put something in the story. I don't know what the hell happened on my birthday. First of all, my birthday this year was bomb. It was the best. Last year, my birthday sucked. My birthday with my family was beautiful, but I had a birthday. I was like starting to see somebody, and he was like all set on like taking me out for my birthday, but it was like such a new relationship. I just didn't want to do that. It just felt like, I don't know, this is like deeply personal for me. I just met you and I don't want to celebrate. But he was just like pushing, which really was like a really good description of our entire relationship, just like not respecting my boundaries.
Yeah.
And this year, my birthday, I celebrated with a bunch of friends, and I felt so celebrated and so honored by these people. And I'm like, oh, this is what birthdays are supposed to be like. I think I compare it to my last year's birthday with the guy that I was dating. he just wanted to take me out because like he felt like that's what he should do. And it was really all about him. I want to take you
Right.
out because I want to show you what a good man I am. Da, 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 da. It had absolutely nothing to do with me. He could have taken Big Bird out and he would have felt the same. Like, and this year it really clicked. I'm like, I feel celebrated. I feel honored. And I think that is the purpose of these birthdays. And I think I was telling my followers of like when I turned 44, like something clicked in my head. And I think this is the Xiangmu like phase in my life where it was like literally like I saw myself, like I manifested this other. And it just, since then, it's only been a few weeks, but it's like I see the world very clearly, very differently. It's like go, 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 go. For the last few years, it's been very foggy, right? But it literally clicked. Like I have very strong like opinions and ideas and beliefs. It's now forming, which is what metal age is supposed to do. You're really supposed to look at what do you believe in? What are your values? What are your morals? What are your ethics? What are these guiding principles that are guiding you throughout life? Right? Because you got to figure this out before you get into that next phase in your life.
Have you looked up the angel code for 44?
No, you are all about numbers. You're gonna school me on this. What does it mean?
Well, no, I haven't either. But you're aware of angel codes, right?
I used to have a necklace 444. Oh my god. Okay, back to numbers. My mom had a dream before I was born, or like right when she was pregnant with me, of the number 4, of 4 piglets. And she's not she has certain dreams, but she's always talked about this dream my whole life, that there are 4 piglets, and she kept this is just so clear in her head. And you know, pigs in East Asian culture is all about abundance and wealth, right? And so it's just a lucky animal. So I don't know, maybe 4-4. And then my friend was like, 4-4, that's 8. It's an eternity.
Right. Yeah, I'm curious. I'm too scared to like close this chat and look up 4 angel codes. Don't want anything to happen on Mercury retrograde.
Yeah.
But I have a feeling there's going to be another thing here that's related to what you're experiencing.
Yeah.
And that's really cool about your mom's dream. Before you were born or before you were conceived?
I think maybe when she was pregnant with me.
Oh, okay.
So she just sensed that. She was like, you're going to be very lucky. And it's funny because like throughout her lives, like her friends would say, she's the lucky one. Like this is the lucky child. But I never felt that way. In my life, it doesn't. I mean, I'm grateful, and I do feel incredibly blessed, but it's been a very difficult life. But you know, East Asian culture, it's like luck means nothing. Luck doesn't mean what you think it's gonna mean.
No, exactly. I was gonna say, like, the fact that you've come out of all of that, like, that's luck.
Yeah.
Wow. So what does touch look like? What are you doing right now?
I do.
Or
My
what is it?
favorite practice is this somatic practice that I learned recently, which is a self-hug practice. And I'm going to teach it at the workshop, so I won't share too much. But it is a self-hugging practice that integrates breathing as well. And I think it's so simple. Like trauma, it's, you know, we live in a culture where we try to rationalize it and make it logical. And and for people like you and I and our listeners, probably, we're probably more nerdy intellectuals, right? And trauma is one of those things that just doesn't make sense. So if it doesn't make sense, it is very hard to rationalize. And so, but the body remembers, right? Even childhood trauma, your body still remembers. So of course, it makes sense that we would have to work with the body. And when you think about the Po, I think of it this way. Your Shen, your Hun, your Zhe, your Yi, they've already experienced multiple lives, right? So it's like when things happen, they're like, we already did this. Like we got through this war, they're our highest consciousness in some ways. But the Po, it's like its first time in life. So everything is very like what is this? What is that? You know? And so when trauma happens, of course you would have to work with the Poe because the other spirits are like, oh no, like we've gone through worse than this in the other lives, but the Poe has never gone through that before. And so touch is like, I think I'm working with the Poe in that way where it's like it tells you so much about it. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know if it's making sense, but
Well, I think too, touch is uniquely human. Like it's the human experience, as in, so when, spirit world, spirit realm, a lot of those I imagine are lacking touch, right? They're more ethereal and like I think it's what really grounds you in the human experience. And it's like, oh, this is real. This is real. Like my hand's not going through my face, or you know what I mean? And it has this density to it that's very grounding too. It's a heaviness. And so I could see how for you and what you're sharing, kind of the space you're in right now at 44, that it would give that reminder like, oh yeah, this is, and it's funny too, because when people lose consciousness, like you'll be like, oh, they'll like slap you on the face, or they'll like, it's very much like, how do we ground this person? I remember when I was giving birth to Noah and I felt really out of my body. And then the midwife like started to rub my baihui, my like do 20 to like, and I was like, oh, that's so interesting. But it was like a reminder, like you're here, let's close this up. Let's close this like leak up that you could be kind of like leaving your body through here. Let's close it up. Let's seal it. And let's be like, you're here, you're here. So anyway, that's what I think about too. Like that part of touch that must be so grounding and so like reminding yourself
yeah, this
of the
reminds me
human
of
experience.
this reminds me when I used to see patients, because as acupuncturists, it's all touch practices. But I don't practice clinically,
Mm-hmm.
so I don't touch. But I would touch patients, obviously with consent. But like I would hold their hands as I do their pulse. And that's just how I was trained. And not everyone's trained that way, but for multiple reasons. One, I can gather a lot of information about like the temperature of their hand, right? And then also it made me
Mm-hmm.
connect with them on a different level,
Mm-hmm.
as opposed to just taking the pulse without, so, and I remember patients saying they really like that. And sometimes
Mm-hmm.
I remember having some patients who were, experiencing a lot of grief. And grief is funny because it's kind of Po related, but it can also be Hun related and Shen related. If that grief is excessive or trauma, like their mind goes elsewhere. And though I was trained to touch them, but with a firm touch to ground them, to bring their spirits back in. And you could see it in their eyes. Like they would be off, like talking. And then you just like their hand, like squeeze their hand a little bit in that comforting, nourishing way. And I could see their spirits just come back, like here
Yeah.
in this treatment room.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. You know what's cute is some of my patients, when I do some points in their palm, by reflex they go and they hold my hand. And I
Oh.
don't think they realize that that's what they're doing. It's like they feel an object in their hand and they close down on it. Like they want to feel it, they want to touch it. And I feel like that's also human nature to be like, oh, what's in my hand? What do I feel? I'm going to close it and I'm going to feel what it is. And it's just cute because as a practitioner, I'm like, oh, cute. They just held my hand. They didn't even know, but they like went down and my hand was there because I'm doing a point there. But the grounding thing, or just like touching patients, I do the same, but at the feet.
Oh yeah, I love
like,
that.
yeah. And I'll go right at the kidney 1 area and on top. So like right at the sole of the feet, for the bottom of the feet for non-acupuncturist. And then at the very top, liver 3, the top of the feet, and this little sandwich with like your foot in the middle there. And I'll just hold that for a while. And then I'll feel their toes and same thing. How are they toes cold? How's their circulation? And I find it has the same effect. It's just like, they might come in like super chatty because they're nervous. And then by the time I'm down there, quiet, starting to drift off a little bit. Or, there's something about it that helps people just feel safer and just like, I got you. You're going to be okay. I got you.
The other thing is, so this month I've been still celebrating my birthday, doing like little nice things and treating myself, not big things, but like fun little things to celebrate and honor myself. And so I went to a city recently outside the US. I talked about it in my Instagram about collecting my hungry ghosts that I left there. They're all back. The kids are back. I felt like a mom picking them up. Like, come on in. And I felt like incredibly integrated. Like I felt together. And I was telling my followers that when I had experienced trauma at that city, and I remember not feeling my limbs. Like I was limbless and I was just a torso. And that happened over a period of few days. But I just remember feeling that. And it's funny because I had so many people in the DMs come to me and they're like, oh my God, I experienced this. I experienced this right after the birth of my kid. I experienced this when this traumatic thing happened, when I experienced this abuse. I thought it was just me, where it's just the torso, limbless, right? And so when I collected my hungry ghost kids, I was like, okay, now the real work is going to start to happen, but I still need to move this energy. I'm still in this city. I still need to do something. So I booked a massage, and I'm very picky about massages, and I've just been to so many bad massage therapists, but this one was amazing. The best, probably the best. This one in New York is probably the best. And she really worked me. Like I was crying. I was like, she's like, breathe, 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 she gave me her own ginger tea afterwards. And she, told me I needed to stay warm. But in that massage, that touch practice, she moved more than just stagnation. It was like a spiritual, like cleansing. And she was like sweating afterwards because I was so tight. And I was like, oh my God, all my ghosts are in this room. Like, open the doors because it's like you can feel them. Like, but I'm so grateful that she did that. And it's just, as she was massaging me in that touch practice, I was like, wow, it's so incredible. And I don't think like at least in my life, like touch isn't something that I experience a lot, that I want more of.
Yeah. But it's a specific kind of touch, that you're experiencing that you want more of. Yeah.
Or even like hugs. Like in New York, my friends and I, like the way we greet each other would be like a hug and a kiss. But now I live in the Pacific Northwest. People don't do that. And when you do that, it's like their hugs are very awkward. It just doesn't feel good.
Yeah. They're like, oh, why are they hugging? Yeah.
Yeah. And so it's a very cold kind of, culture here. And touch isn't a big thing. Like I don't even see people really like romantic partners like making out or holding hands. Like in New York, like people are just like making out on the street all the time, like feeling each other up, touching, touch. And so it's a totally different culture here. I think that's why when I see my nephews, I'm like, hug me tighter. And they're so little. They're like, I am.
Oh my gosh. But COVID also changed a lot of that too.
Yeah.
The whole
Did you
touch
grow up in a
culture.
touchy family?
No, my dad, no, I didn't. So my mom, like I've talked about, this kind of traditional Chinese household, and no one there was comfortable with touch. And then my dad, who grew up in a Caucasian household, and his mom was a professor, college professor, which is just to say she was pretty progressive in Boulder, at University of Colorado. So my dad was always really comfortable with touch, and I think he was shown a lot of healthy affection growing up. So he was really affectionate with us as children. But my mom, she was a lot. She was like, yeah, she wasn't into touch, and she wouldn't be comfortable with my dad hugging her publicly or trying to hold her hand publicly or like kissing her publicly. She'd feel really embarrassed or really shy or like try to kind of shoo him away. And even when we were growing up, this, I guess this could, people will have their own opinions, but I remember like at a certain age, she didn't want us to be like showering with them, and things like that, because she wanted to make sure, just like a lot more reserved when it came to like body and touch and all of those things. So she had like pretty strict expectations of like what was quote unquote appropriate and what wasn't.
Mm.
And so I think I gravitated more towards that because she kind of made the rules. And so I've never been really comfortable with touch myself. But in Hawaii, we do same thing. We greet each other with a hug and a kiss. So there's that aloha spirit aspect. But then there's also a lot of East Asian people here. I think like probably the most are going to be coming from Japan. And that is not a super touch focused culture either. So there's like a mix here. And you can feel comfortable either way, like doing the that like aloha spirit greeting of a hug and a kiss, or just kind of respecting some space and not engaging in that because of like the more reserved East Asian cultures that are here. But anyway, I'm not super touchy with my friends, and we're not. I see some friend groups and it's really cute how they'll like hold hands or like put their arms around each other, like lean on each other. And I think it's adorable, but I never grew up doing that with my friends.
So what about with you and Noah, or you and your husband? Are you touchy? You're not touchy.
Not touchy with my husband. He grew up similarly with his parents not showing a lot of physical affection to each other or towards the children. And same with his grandparents, same with my grandparents. So no, him and I, sometimes I tease because I feel like if you wouldn't know we were a couple, you wouldn't be able to tell because we're not touching each other.
Be like, Paige, this weird guy's been following you.
Who is he? But with Noah, oh my gosh, I love like hugging him and holding him and smelling him. But now that he's 10, it probably started when he was 8, where he just didn't like that as much. Like he just felt like restrained. Like he'd feel like he was getting too hot, or he wanted to be like break free of a hold. So he doesn't, but sometimes I'll like sneak a smell in, like I'll like be above him looking over his homework and I'll like smell his hair or something. But no, when he was younger, I would like always hold him and carry him, but he's kind of grown out of that.
Yeah. Oh man.
So okay, so you're exploring touch right now. Is that also the one that you want to in the future continue to develop? I mean, of course we want to keep developing all of our senses, but is there like another one in the queue that you're really interested in getting to and going a little deeper with?
Right now, it's been so much about touch. Just because I'm learning so quickly of like why it's important, because we hear about it growing up, like, in school, education, whatever. But I think I needed to understand it from a trauma lens of why we do this. Like, I always need to understand from an intellectual, logical sense. Like, what is why? Like, why is touch so important? Why is breathing so important? And I think I'm just in that phase of life where I'm really focused on trauma healing, like in a very intentional, conscious way, right? Like I told you, like where I'm starting my, what is it? EMDR, right?
EMDR.
Right? And you do that, right?
Yeah.
And so, I don't know how this is going to play out, but it's clicked to me. It's like, okay, this is why we start with touch, just because it also logically it makes sense. Like trauma is so complicated and it doesn't make sense, and it's like it can be really there's a lot to unpack, and so you, in order to create new neural pathways, you have to create it in a very different way, and touch is one of the most powerful way to do it. And you also
Mhm.
don't want to exacerbate your trauma as your trauma healing, right? You want
Right.
to titrate and do it slowly, right? Like
Mhm.
titration, so you don't just blow up. And that's why I don't think I've ever been really drawn to um things like really extreme like ayahuasca retreats and things like that. It's like I know exactly what that's going to feel like for me. And so I think that titration, that slow, it's going to take the next few years for me to fully understand what that feels like.
Yeah.
Um,
That makes so much sense because trauma wants to go what they'll say like low and slow. Because a part of why trauma happened was it was like too much, too fast, too soon. And
exactly.
so you would want to then go at it slowly. And what you said with titration. And because I come off of my EMDR sessions when we do this recording today. So I know our last episode was a cliffhanger for a lot of people, but that's really because we had technical issues. So we just like cut it off and everyone was like, Dark Night of the Soul, what about it? But one of the things that has come from it is my understanding of my tendency towards OCD. And there's this what's called like exposure, I think ERP. So it's like exposure response, maybe protocol or something.
Mhm.
But it's exposing yourself to the trigger that causes a compulsion. And I just remember when I learned about this therapy, and it's a little bit more old school, I was like, why would I do that to myself? Why would my
Can you give an
nervous system?
example? Like,
So it's like, okay, I'll give an example. So if someone is like a germaphobe, and then you would say, okay,
oh
let's
God,
start by you just like,
I'm already getting anxious.
so they might say, like, let's just start with you looking at a trash can. And then, like, let's say the end game is like you put your hand in the trash can.
Oh
So,
no.
like, my mind is like, why would you ever put your hand in a trash can? And so I am kind of like pushing back and thinking that exposure for OCD might not be the best suited path for me because I don't know if it's the kindest path for my nervous system.
Wow,
Whereas
yeah.
something like CBT, right, cognitive behavior therapy, where when you're more rational and you can understand like what's irrational, what's a response to trying to cope with trauma that like started the OCD or whatever, like that feels better for my nervous system. And that also feels more root cause for me. Whereas exposure feels more like symptoms, like the branches, right?
Yeah.
Right?
Can I go
Yeah.
back to like, okay, I know we started off as a birthday and we talked about like natal charts, but this is actually something that I've been really thinking about in terms of trauma healing. And I'm thinking about it again for my workshop. um, that you should look at your chart to see what is the best way to heal. And I love how you said it. It's kinder to my nervous system because there's so many ways to heal trauma. And I think
Yeah.
we sometimes get caught up like, and there's a lot of shame when one modality doesn't work, right? It's like, oh, this is the one I was taught and it doesn't work for me. And we push it and push it and push it. But I have also been looking at my chart and it's like, kind of like you, CBT works great for me. I love CBT. And
Mm-hmm.
it's because my chart is all about, it has a lot of resource stars. So resource stars need information. And I realized one way that I heal trauma is flooding my brain with training, certification, learning. And that may sound like me detaching myself from the work or not really doing the work, but I'm doing the work in these trainings because they're highly experiential. And I learn so much that way, as opposed to me doing something else that's doesn't require like learning. Learning is the biggest thing that's in my chart. So I should do that. It is the kindest
Yeah.
way.
But that also I think is a big Virgo trait.
And metal.
It's like, there's like Virgos, I mean, we're just sponges, and it's like we can take in so much information and it can stick, and we can like synthesize it really well. And some people feel like it's this like neuroses, but for us it's like super healing. And it's just so fascinating how these different archetypes really do need different modalities for healing. And I think when someone pursues one thing that might be tried and true for a certain culture or a certain sign or whatever it's going to be, and it doesn't stick, like what were saying earlier, then the mind frame should be like this like modality wasn't fit for me, but there has to be something else out there that will. Yeah. But okay, Tamsin, these conversations are always, I'm always like, could go on forever and go even deeper. And I can't wait. After this episode, we're going to go even deeper in the six senses. We'll talk about why we chose the same for season 2, how we want to develop more of our senses, what that's even going to look like. So that's going to be super exciting.
Yeah. And we'll do something similar like this, where there's a theme where we're weaving in. I think people are interested in really learning more about Chinese medicine, especially things that we don't learn in school, or a lot of my clients aren't even in the field, but they're interested and they get it. And so I love talking more about theory and then really relating it to our everyday life.
Yeah, same. All right. Well, thank you, everybody.
Bye.
Bye. Well, that's it for today. If you like this episode, please share it with a friend and give us a review to let us know how you've been navigating your beauty journey. You can also follow us on Instagram at Beauty Birthright Pod and say hello.
To learn more about face reading, Batsa astrology, and seasonal living, head over to elementalarchetypes.com and follow me at Elemental Archetypes.
And to explore beauty through your own hands, visit yangface.com and follow at yang.face for tutorials, Chinese medicine theory, and candid thoughts on cultural appreciation.